When you think of Vietnam, chances are your mind jumps straight to old war movies. A country frozen in time, defined by a conflict that ended half a century ago. You probably think you already know everything about it. But what if I told you that picture is completely wrong? What if I told you Vietnam today is one of the most entrepreneurial, freedom-loving societies in Asia? A coffee powerhouse fueling mornings across the globe. A nation that has outlasted and defeated empire after empire. And a culture so ancient, it makes much of the modern world look brand new. In the next few minutes, we are literally tearing up the old script. We're going to explore 7 shocking truths that will completely change the way you see this country. Number 1. The communist capitalists. Let's kick things off with the biggest paradox of all. Vietnam is a communist country that is obsessed with capitalism. That sounds impossible, doesn't it? Vietnam is one of only 5 communist countries left in the entire world. The Communist Party holds absolute political power. And yes, opposition is tightly restricted. But step into Ho Chi Minh City or Hanoi, and you'll feel a dynamic society buzzing with an insane, unstoppable energy. Skyscrapers light up the skyline in neon colors. Streets are alive with small businesses in every corner. Cafes, tech startups, and luxury malls buzz with the sound of trade. And unlike other communist states, Vietnam doesn't lock down the internet. You'll find TikTok, Netflix, and all the Western social media platforms right at your fingertips. Doing business here is faster and easier than you'd expect. Registering a company can be done online with minimal cost, and reforms keep reducing red tape. This pro-business mindset has helped Vietnam attract huge inflows of foreign investment in manufacturing, electronics, and high-tech exports. Today, it leads Southeast Asia with 18 free trade agreements, giving it one of the most open trade networks in the region. As of the end of 2024, Vietnam's total trade value was approximately $786 billion, representing a trade-to-GDP ratio of 165%. This high ratio places Vietnam among the most trade-reliant economies in Southeast Asia. The results speak for themselves. Nearly 1 million enterprises and 5 million individual business households drive over half of GDP and employ more than 40 million people. In May 2025, Party leader To Lem doubled down on this model by issuing a landmark policy that shifts the economy toward private sector champions, building globally competitive conglomerates instead of relying only on state firms or foreign companies. So here's the paradox. In Vietnam, the red flag of communism flies above stock exchanges, venture capital firms, and luxury brands. It's this unique blend of political control and economic freedom that has turned Vietnam into one of the fastest-growing economies on Earth. Number 2. The ancient newcomer. Now, for the second shocking truth. Vietnam isn't just an upstart nation shaped by modern wars. It's one of the world's oldest civilizations. Listen to this. Before the Roman Empire even existed, sophisticated societies were thriving in Vietnam's Red River Delta. The Dung Son culture flourished from around 1000 BCE to 100 CE, and it was no ordinary society. These people mastered bronze casting, producing massive ceremonial drums that remain icons of spiritual and political power. They pioneered wet rice farming, built complex social structures, and created trade networks that stretched far across Asia. Chinese chronicles later described these people as the Lac Viet, who, by the 7th century BCE, had founded Vietnam's first kingdom, Van Lang. By the 3rd century BCE, another kingdom called O Loc emerged. In Hanoi, archaeologists uncovered the Co Loa Citadel, a massive fortress city dating back to 258 BCE, proof that an organized Vietnamese state existed centuries before Chinese rule began in 111 BCE. These discoveries aren't just ancient trivia. They're evidence of thousands of years of continuous culture and resilience, making Vietnam one of the most enduring civilizations on Earth. Number 3. The East Asian soul in Southeast Asia. Here's the third big surprise. Vietnam is geographically in Southeast Asia, but culturally, its soul is East Asian. For more than 1,000 years, from 111 BCE to 938 CE, Vietnam lived under direct Chinese rule. And during that period, Vietnam absorbed a deep imprint of Chinese civilization that still shapes it today. Confucianism became the backbone of governance and family life. A civil service exam system trained mandarins and bureaucrats. Chinese characters dominated written records for centuries, later evolving into Chu Nam, a uniquely Vietnamese script derived from Chinese characters. However, the modern Vietnamese writing system known as Chu Quoc Nu is based on the Roman alphabet with diacritics to capture Vietnamese tones and sounds. The script was built upon the work of early 16th century Portuguese missionaries and later formalized and expanded by French missionaries like Alexandre de Rhodes in the 17th century. Like China, Korea, and Japan, Vietnam developed a blended belief system of Confucianism, Taoism, and Mahayana Buddhism. Even in social life, Vietnam's values line up with its northern neighbors. Patrilineal clans and ancestor worship. A strong emphasis on education as the key to success. Filial piety and deep respect for elders, reflected in rituals and hierarchy. This East Asian cultural DNA makes Vietnam's intellectual and political traditions feel closer to China, Korea, and Japan than to its Southeast Asian neighbors like Thailand, Cambodia, or Indonesia, who were more influenced by Indian culture, Theravada Buddhism, or Islam. In short, Vietnam may lie in Southeast Asia on the map, but in philosophy, governance, and worldview, it's part of the East Asian family of civilizations. Number 4. The coffee powerhouse in a tea-drinking continent. Fact number 4 will blow your mind. In a continent that worships tea, Vietnam is a global coffee powerhouse. Think Brazil and Italy are the kings of coffee? Think again. Vietnam is the world's second largest coffee exporter, right behind Brazil, and the undisputed champion of Robusta beans, the strong, punchy variety that fuels most of the instant coffee on Earth. And this year, Vietnam's coffee exports are expected to smash through the $8 billion mark for the first time ever. But Vietnam's coffee story isn't just about numbers. It's about creativity. Vietnam has one of the most creative coffee cultures anywhere. The French may have introduced coffee, but the Vietnamese transformed it into something completely unique. Forget your standard latte. Here, coffee is whipped with sweetened condensed milk, turned into a dessert with egg yolk foam, or even blended with salt cream, coconut, and avocado. Yes, avocado coffee is a thing, and it's delicious. And the coffee shop? That's not just a place to grab a drink. In Vietnam, it's a social ritual. From giant modern cafes to tiny street-side stools, coffee is how people connect, unwind, and make business deals. It's slow, it's social, and it's an essential part of daily life. Even more, coffee shops here each have their own distinct vibe and decor, quirky, artsy, and deeply personal. A reflection of individual creativity, in sharp contrast to the cookie-cutter sterility of global chains like Starbucks. This country took a colonial import, rewrote the rules, and turned it into both a national obsession and a global force. If this fact just changed the way you look at Vietnam, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below. We're only halfway through, and the next ones get even crazier. What's shocked you the most so far? Number 5. The Giant Slayer. All right, on to our 5th mind-blowing fact. Vietnam's entire history is the story of David beating Goliath, over and over and over again. For a country this size, its military record is absolutely staggering. Time and again, Vietnam has faced down empires far bigger, richer, and stronger, and walked away the winner. It started with 1,000 years of resisting Chinese dynasties. Despite repeated invasions, Vietnamese uprisings, led by figures like the Trung sisters and Lady Trio, carved a legend of defiance that still inspires today. In the 13th century, when the Mongol Empire was bulldozing everything from the Middle East to Europe, Vietnam fought them off 3 separate times. While cities across Asia and Europe fell, tiny Dai Viet forced the most fearsome army in history to retreat. Fast forward to the 20th century. Vietnam kicked out the French in 1954, a defeat so shocking it ended French colonialism in all of Indochina. Then came the war with the United States, the world's superpower, which dragged on for 2 decades. Yet, Vietnam endured and ultimately emerged victorious in 1975. And just 3 years later, in 1978, when Cambodia's Khmer Rouge launched horrific cross-border attacks and massacres against Vietnamese border villages, Vietnam sent its army into Cambodia to retaliate. Vietnamese forces swiftly advanced to Cambodia's capital and overthrew the genocidal Khmer Rouge regime by January 1979. Because the Khmer Rouge regime was supported by China, China viewed this military takedown from Vietnam as a threat to its regional influence. In response, China launched a massive invasion along Vietnam's northern border. Vietnamese troops, once again, forced the northern giant neighbor China to pull back. So you see, Vietnam, in a nutshell, is a story of a nation that has built its identity on resistance, resilience, and victory. Vietnam's history is proof that size doesn't decide the outcome. Grit does. Number 7. The economic miracle. And finally, our 7th point. If you still picture Vietnam as a poor country, your information is decades out of date, because what you're about to hear is nothing short of one of the greatest economic comeback stories in human history. Think about this. In the late 1980s, Vietnam was one of the poorest nations on Earth. Hunger and food shortages were everywhere. The world looked at Vietnam as a broken country. Fast forward to today. Vietnam has become a middle-income powerhouse. Its GDP has been growing at breakneck speed, averaging 6 to 7% every year for decades without a recession. Even during the COVID years. In 2024, it hit 7.09% growth, one of the fastest in the world. And experts say Vietnam is set to keep that momentum rolling, crossing the 8% growth rate for 2025 and beyond. But these aren't just numbers. This growth has lifted 40 million people out of poverty. The extreme poverty rate fell from over 50% in the 1990s to just around 3% today. That is insane. Life expectancy has climbed past 73 years. A significant policy change in 2025 makes tuition for public preschool through high school free. School meals are free, and healthcare services has expanded dramatically, with the government aiming for universal healthcare by 2030. In pure numbers, the transformation is staggering. GDP per capita has surged from around $100 in the 1980s to over $4,700 for 2024. Based on purchasing power parity, it is over $14,000. Vietnam has already exceeded the United Nations Millennium Development Goals ahead of schedule. And now, it has set an audacious target to become a fully developed, high-income country by 2045. This economic miracle puts Vietnam in the same conversation as South Korea and Taiwan, other East Asian tigers that went from poverty to prosperity in just a few generations. And looking at Vietnam's track record, I would not bet against them pulling it off. But here's the kicker. This economic miracle story is way too big for one video. In a future deep dive, we'll break down how exactly Vietnam pulled this off, and how it plans to achieve the high-income country status by 2045. So, if you want to witness a country's miracle transformation, make sure to hit that subscribe button. So what is the real Vietnam? It's a land of inspiring, shocking contradictions. It's a communist state with a capitalist heart, an ancient culture with a super young, ambitious population. It's a society where modernity and traditions coexist. And it's a country of unstoppable warriors who now build bridges with the enemies they defeated. The real Vietnam is rising, and the world is just now starting to see through fogs of war, prejudice, and misconceptions. Have you been to Vietnam? What surprised you the most from your visit? I'm curious to find out in the comments section. Thanks for watching.